I've got a bit of a Turner Classic Movies addiction at the moment because of the 31 days of Oscar programming. While I was gathering my thoughts about Evilspeak this morning, I was also watching the 30s version of David Copperfield. So I've definitely got Orphans and Outcasts on the brain. And it took me several evenings to finally finish this particular watch of Evilspeak. But even though it starts slow, it ends with a big old payoff if you like revenge movies. But is this a revenge movie? And who is the revenge visited upon? I would make the bold statement that horror film aficionados would see this as a bloody precursor to Revenge of the Nerds, but maybe the average moviegoer in 1981 would have seen our nerdy protagonist as their villain. The purpose of watching Evilspeak was that it was brought up by a listener of this podcast as a movie about evil technology, and it certainly is that. But what I'm here to ask is, what does the evil tech, in this case a primitive home computer, highlight a fear of? And I would say it's a fear of nerds. It's also a fear of the esoteric, which applies to the main character of this movie using a computer at all because it was a specialized skill at the time. And then him using it to raise the spirit of an evil monk from the 1500s, and that monk himself who did black masses, because esoteric not only refers to special interests, it's also a term that can be applied to magic, in this case, magic of the dark variety. Stanley Coopersmith, played by the ice cream man himself, Clint Howard, is the boy at the military academy that everyone hates. He's an orphan, a ward of the state, who has been shoehorned into this testosterone-fest Marshall Farts High School that's usually reserved for the sons of senators. This might be seen as inclusion, and certainly would be by the head of the academy, who is played by the one-armed uncle from Harold and Maude, who evidently specialized in military characters. Here he's got two arms, and he uses one of them to beat the devil out of Coopersmith with a cane for too many minor infractions. But if you look at why Coopersmith might be assigned by the system to a military school, it's because the state wants him to be useful on their dime. Another cog in the wheel of the war machine, and he's a bad cog. He's awkward and clumsy and smarter than most of the other 30-year-old teenagers at the school, so they all hate him. And the administration's policy forces the soccer coach to let him be on the soccer team, so the coach hates him too. The school priest is evil and unprofessional, evidenced by him complaining to a potential financial supporter about Coopersmith's very existence at the school, right before he tells her all about the mad monk Esteban I mentioned earlier, played by Bull from Night Court back when he played villains all the time. Esteban was excommunicated from the church in the prologue of this movie for performing black masses and is now entombed under the chapel. Do you think that's an appropriate tale to tell to a rich lady who looks vaguely like Angie Dickinson? Well, she just smiles and enjoys the tour of the school chapel, so I guess she's evil too. I mean, she definitely is, because she's the mother of the head bully at the school, unironically named Bubba, and played by Donna's dad from that 70s show, minus the wig. Bubba and his dorky-looking cronies torment Coopersmith with the express consent of the soccer coach, who wants them to do something to poor old Coop that gets him struck off the team. And that something turns out to be taking the poor guy's pants off while he's trying to talk to a girl behind the bleachers right after the school hosts a swimsuit competition called Miss Heavy Artillery. The commanding officer finds him on the ground with no pants on, and now he can't play soccer, and that's almost the last straw. Now, I forgot to mention there are only two people at the school who are kind to Coop. Seemingly the only black kid at the school, who probably gets bullied by these idiots himself, though we don't see it, and the cook, who gives Coop a steak and a puppy. Well, guess what Bubba the bully does to the puppy? This movie is probably the inspiration for John Wick. Since Coopersmith has been assigned the punishment of cleaning the caverns under the chapel where Esteban is buried, and since he's a computer geek who uses an evil machine, we know it's evil because it turns itself on after he turns it off. He's using it to translate the monk's Latin notes about a black mass. The big, gory climax of the movie that landed Evilspeak on the video nasty list pops off right in the chapel as the priest, the coach, the head of the school, and the soccer team, minus Cooper, are all praying to God for the big homecoming game. Now, why do I think this isn't a simple revenge picture? I'm just thinking of what computers represented in 1981 when this came out. Very few people own them, and they weren't usually communication devices. They were mostly used for business, accounting, research, and the military, which is why a poor kid like Coop had access to one in the first place. In short, over half the people even using computers were smart people, and people hate smart people, especially the smart people who are only interested in knowledge for its own sake, and they also fear people who have access to something that they don't have, in this case, a computer. The fear of a computer as a military tool was handled much better in war games a couple years later. Yeah, everyone at this school is a dick. But Coop doesn't really get a satisfying revenge and ultimately is punished because he ends up in the old reliable plot device we're starting to see as a trend here, the mental hospital. Coopersmith, the name, by the way, might mean someone who makes barrels, but more sources say it's a version of the name Coppersmith, which is a blacksmith who works with copper. Copperfield, Coppersmith, Coopersmith. Using the Bible strictly as literature here, because this movie does heavily feature religion. In the 4th chapter of 2 Timothy in the Bible, the Apostle Paul mentions a coppersmith. Alexander the coppersmith did me great harm. The Lord will repay him according to his deeds. So that's a neat etymology of the name. Now, if Coop had just kept his head down, he could have been out of the army in a couple of years and on to a nice job working for Nintendo or something. And everyone knows getting a good job is the best revenge against high school bullies who are probably going to be senators. You know, I last watched Evilspeak about 20 years ago, and the only thing I remembered about it was pigs eating people. It's interesting to note that, like the Black Mess, possessed pigs are a perversion of something from the Bible. When Jesus cast the demons out of a man in Matthew chapter 8, Mark chapter 5, and Luke chapter 8, the pigs run off a cliff and drown themselves. But here, the possessed pigs run around eating people, most notably the commanding officer's secretary while she's in the shower. Earlier in the movie, she was really enjoying listening to Coopersmith being beaten in a comedic way. That's right, there's a little bit of intentional humor in this movie. My favorite part being when all the bullies are at the roller disco and Coopersmith puts on skates to go and confront them and then skates away really awkwardly like he just learned how. I've got to give praise to Clint Howard for carrying this whole movie. You really believe he's Coopersmith, and most of the movie is either his facial expressions or him taking a lot of physical punishment. He's good at falling down on camera, which I would imagine is no easy task. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of my Fear of Tech series. Thanks to commenter EvilDead373 for bringing up Evilspeak in the comments of my When Electronics Attack episode, which I will link in the description. Keep commenting with evil tech movies. I'm going to feature another movie I got from a listener's comment as the next one in this series. And until then, everyone keep on doing your best, no matter what sort of pig shit gets flung at you, and watch out for guys named Bubba, 'cause God bless them, they don't know any better. Bye.